Dara, are we good?
Webinar is started.
Okay, great. Well, hello everyone. Welcome everybody to our February Appalachia Audubon program. And this month it's also a lot more than it normally is, because tonight marks the beginning of a 2-day celebration of some of the most special natural areas in our region, some of which were featured on the slideshow that you just saw. So Appalachia Audubon has partnered with the Old Growth Forest Network and staff at 2 Florida state parks to bring attention to the old growth forests remaining in our region. And we've decided to begin with Wakulla County. The reasons for that, we hope, will become clear once you hear from the others participating in tonight's event. Tonight, we're going to get an overview of the Old Growth Forest Network from its executive director, Joan Malouf, who we're honored to have here with us tonight. Then awards will be presented to the managers of 2 forests in particular that will be recognized as part of the Old Growth Forest Network. The awards will be followed by our panel discussion, which will be an opportunity to hear from experts in the forest conservation field who will discuss why our old growth forests matter, how they can be protected, and what we can do to connect with them. We're very fortunate to have WFSU's Tom Flanagan with us to facilitate the discussion. Tom will ask the panelists questions that our Pines to Palms committee came up with, but there will be an opportunity towards the end of the panel for you to ask your questions as well. We hope that this panel encourages you to take an even more active role in the conservation of our forests, and especially to experience them for yourselves. Check out the Appalachia Audubon website at appalachia.org and our Facebook page after the event for details on how to explore some of the most amazing and special natural areas in Wakulla County. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Joan Malouf. Joan Malouf, Professor Emeritus at Salisbury University, founded the Old Growth Forest Network to preserve, protect, and promote the country's few remaining stands of old growth forest. She spends her time lecturing, writing, visiting forests, assisting private landowners, and supporting local groups trying to protect community forests from development. She's been an integral part of making these Wakulla County forest recognitions happen, and we're so grateful that she's here with us tonight. Joan, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Peter. What a great night to celebrate the forests in your county. The Old Growth Forest Network was formed as an organization to help preserve and safeguard the last of the ancient forests in our country. As you know, they've been declining for hundreds of years and we've been losing them. So the Old Growth Forest Network has a mission of saying, we're not going to lose any more of our older forests. And not only that, we're going to help connect people with these forests so they can know where they are, so they can develop a protective, loving relationship for them. And we know these forests are so precious because of the way that they clean the air, they clean the water, they're places of biodiversity, and they're also places of beauty where we can go and have our spirits refreshed just by spending time in them. So the goal of the Old Growth Forest Network is to ensure that there is at least one forest in each county in the US where forests can grow that is thoroughly protected and open to the public and relatively accessible. So the forest is protected and people can build a relationship to the forest. So far, we have 116 forests in the Old Growth Forest Network. And if you're curious about where they are, you can look at the website oldgrowthforest.net and see directions to all these forests. They're in 24 different states and the network is growing very quickly. And we're very excited tonight that we will be adding forest number 117 and 118 to the Old Growth Forest Network. And these forests in Wakulla County will also be highlighted on our website for others to find and understand about the forests and the history of these forests. This is a big job that we have in front of us. There's thousands of counties in the country. So how we're able to accomplish this work is by getting a volunteer in each of the counties who are familiar with the forest and can advise us as to which forests they think are the best ones to add to the Old Growth Forest Network. So we'd like to thank our county coordinator, for Wakulla County, Jim Stevenson, for helping us out. And Jim is so perfect for this job because he was the former chief naturalist of Florida State Park. So I'd like to thank Jim and all the people at Audubon, Amelia Fasaro also, who is a special friend. So at the same time that we are celebrating these special forests, we also celebrate the managers of the forest, because it's a big job, big responsibility to be managing one of these forests that has trees in it often hundreds of years old, and to make sure that they are respected by everyone. So tonight's dedications will be Wakulla, here we go, Wakulla Springs, the Edward Ball Wakulla Springs State Park, particularly the legacy property. And we'd like to present Park Manager Amy Conyers with the plaque welcoming that park into the Old Growth Forest Network. Amy has been in the Florida State Parks for 16 years now, and she worked very hard to make sure that the legacy property had strong enough protections to enable it to be in the Old Growth Forest Network. And Amy will get the real plaque tomorrow from our network manager, Sarah Horsley, who has traveled from Atlanta to be down at the park tomorrow. I'm in Maryland at the moment, so I won't be there tomorrow. But Amy, congratulations on having your park recognized and for the great work that you do caring for that. And the other forest that we are going to enter into the Old Growth Forest Network tonight. So Wakulla County is not going to have one like many other counties, but it's going to have two in the Old Growth Forest Network. So the second forest is the Lockney River State Park. And I would like to present a plaque to Kristen Ebersol, who is the park manager for Lockney. And Kristen has been with the Florida parks for over 20 years. And we thank you, Kristen, for your work managing the park. And we're so thrilled to have two more Florida forests in the Old Growth Forest Network. This is the fourth county in Florida to join the Old Growth Forest Network, and there are 67 counties, so we have ways to go, but you're definitely in the first top 5. And I'm really looking forward to visiting the park myself, these parks. I was supposed to come last March. We had the big plan, and it was literally the day before that life changed for all of us. So I'm glad we could be here tonight, and I'm looking forward to hearing the panelists speak about the other Florida forests in the area, in the county. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
At this time, Amy and Kristen, if you would like to make any comments or remarks, you're welcome to do so before we start the panel.
Well, I just wanted to thank you all and thank Joan. It is my pleasure to accept this recognition on behalf of the park, and being part of the Old Growth Forest Network is a wonderful new way to bring attention to the unique resources that we have to offer. So we are really looking forward to our in-person ceremony tomorrow at the park. We do have a small event. So if you haven't already RSVP'd, you can still join us if you're available. You can join us for lunch at the lodge. We encourage you to make reservations. And we'll also have rangers out on the nature trail from 1 to 2 to facilitate some self-guided hikes. So I hope many of you can join us.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that it's an honor, and I'm honored to accept the designation from the Old Growth Forest Network. Although I'm the one that's accepting it, it was earned by all the managers that managed the area before me, all the individuals that have helped maintain and burn the forest and keep the flatwoods in the state that they're in now. So we appreciate the recognition, and we're dedicated to protecting the forest and making it accessible for generations to come. So thank you very much for this honor. We appreciate it.
Thank you both so much for your work, and you guys are lucky because you got two of the most beautiful places in the state under your purview. So thanks for being a part of this. So this time, I'm very excited to introduce a person who most of you, I hope, know, he is Tom Flanagan. He is the host of WFSU's Perspectives. He's a great person. He does a lot for this community, and we are honored and pleased to have him. And he is going to introduce our panelists for the night. Tom?
Let's see, there we go. We'll start this here. We love technology. It's a wonderful thing. Hey, congratulations to Amy and Kristen and our two latest entries into the Old Growth Forest Network, being the legacy part of Wakulla Springs State Park and the Lockney River State Park. Those will be exciting ceremonies tomorrow. Good evening, folks. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you being part of our Pines to Palms Celebrating Community Forests in Wakulla County event. Let's go around and meet our panelists who will be responding to questions, and then we are going to open it up to some audience questions, and that'll be coming up after the panelists have their say on the questions that we have already teed up for them. First off, let's meet Terry Baker, originally from Marianna. Terry is the CEO of the Society of American Foresters, and the Society is a 120-year-old professional association focusing on the advancement of sustainable management of forest resources through science, education, and technology, promoting professional excellence, ensuring the continued health, integrity, and use of forests to benefit society in perpetuity. And prior to his selection as CEO of the Society in 2018, Terry served in various roles within the USDA Forest Service. His almost 20-year federal career started in his home state of Florida on the Apalachicola, the national forest there, and from whence he held positions on several other national forests in the western and southeastern U.S. He's been a wildland firefighter, a forester, administrator of over 1 million acres. I can't even administer my backyard, Terry. I am so mightily impressed here. He earned his master's degree in forest management and policy from Yale in 2007, a bachelor's degree in forest resources and conservation at the University of Florida in 2004. He was honored by U of F as one of their 40 under 40 alums in 2019, also holds a bachelor's degree in agricultural sciences from Florida A&M University. Go Rattlers. Welcome, Terry. So great to have you part of the panel tonight.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
Next off, let's say hi to Shane Wellendorf, Conservation Coordinator with Tall Timbers Research Station and Land Conservancy, an accredited land trust that works throughout North Florida and South Georgia. Tall Timbers holds over 146,000 acres in conservation easements, including many in the Red Hills region, which conserve some of the best intact longleaf pine and native ground cover savannas in private ownership. And since 2011, Shane has worked on land conservation projects and stewardship of conservation easements. Prior to joining the Land Conservancy, he worked as a research biologist with Tall Timbers. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in wildlife biology from Iowa State University, a Master of Science degree in wildlife science from North Carolina State University, and is a certified wildlife biologist with the Wildlife Society. Welcome, Shane. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with y'all.
Our next panelist, Chuck Hess, a retired wildlife biologist, worked primarily on the Apalachicola National Forest, where he advised the U.S. Forest Service on land management issues and also how to accomplish their activities with minimal impact on natural communities. He completed his bachelor's in '87, master's in '97, and PhD in 2014 at Florida State University for all three. He studied the red-cockaded woodpeckers of the Apalachicola National Forest from '89 through 2013 and was instrumental in the development of the translocation program for this woodpecker to other conservation lands in the Southeast. If you've ever tried to persuade a woodpecker to move, I can't imagine. That's got to be a real challenge for sure. And let's see, we also have primary areas of interest for Chuck being forest management and the importance of fire on the landscape, currently in his second term as a Wakulla County Commissioner. And Commissioner Hess, thank you, sir, for being part of the action tonight.
My pleasure.
And finally, we say hello this evening to Robin Will, recently retired from a 30-year career at the St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge. She graduated with a degree in wildlife biology from FSU with a minor in psychology and chemistry. Upon graduation, she took a public use position at the St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge. The program was in its infancy back in the day, so she was kind of given free rein to create the entire visitor services program. She ultimately retired as the supervisory refuge ranger. For over 30 years, she's taught pre-service teachers, students, and classroom educators how we're all interwoven with trees and healthy water, air, and soil. She has received multiple Project Learning Tree Awards for her work, most recently in 2019 when she earned the Bill Klein Spirit of Florida Award. Now that she's retired, she's most concerned about nature deficit disorder and is strongly committed to engaging all children in a need for nature. What a great background, Robin, and thank you for being part of our discussion this evening.
You're welcome, Tom. It's actually over 40 years, but you know, who's picking at that?
They all run together after a while, don't they?
These folks that graduated in the 80s and 90s, I'm sorry, I'm way back there, but I'm so glad to be part of this distinguished group.
We're glad you can be part of it too, Robin. Hey, I've got a general question. Let's just go around and we'll get about a minute and a half from everyone here. I think we're pretty good here for time, so that'll give us an opportunity to delve a little bit more deeply into these things. And Terry Baker, if we can start with you on this, do you recall any specific like aha moment that connected you to nature? Was it when you were a kid or a discovery later in life? How did that work for you?
There was a few of those moments, I'd say. It wasn't one in particular. You know, growing up there in Mariana, I spent a lot of time outdoors. My grandfather had his own small farm, and he'd take us fishing all over the place there in the Panhandle. And you know, probably I don't know if I call it an aha moment, but you know, of course, when the cows would get out, then you'd have to go into the woods to find them. So so it was a lot of different opportunities. And I think once I actually discovered the profession, a very interesting aha moment actually was with one of the other panelists, Chuck Hess, where I ended up going out straight out of high school and having to show up at work at about 5 o'clock in the morning to go out with Chuck to do some calling for red-cockaded woodpeckers. And then he had me climb a tree on a very small ladder. And I remember just thinking, what in the world have I gotten myself into? But it all just kind of stuck, and made me all the more excited about the work I was starting to do that I didn't know existed. And I'd say last but not least, just remember on a random fire assignment in Virginia and hiking down a trail, and we just came to this one open spot and you could just see out over this valley. And it was just one of the most gorgeous things that you'd ever seen. And that's when I kind of coined my little personal phrase where working in forestry and natural resources, we get paid to go places people pay to go. And so those are kind of those three aha moments for me that it's just played out throughout my life and my career, and just gets reinforced every time I get to go outdoors.
We're so fortunate that when you were hanging out with Chuck, though, that aha moment didn't turn into an oh no moment there, falling out of a tree, perhaps.
You and my mother both.
Shane Wellendorf, your personal epiphany when it comes to the natural world. What was that for you?
Yeah, you know, just like Terry, it's hard to pin down. I grew up hunting and fishing as a child, and obviously got lots of great exposure there, which was really important. But You know, when I first came to Tall Timbers, I got exposed to prescribed fire. And like many of us on this panel, you know, we're all active prescribed burners. But, you know, those first few burns that I participated on was just awe-inspiring. Not only, you know, the skill and the coordination that comes with participating on a burn with an experienced burner, but after the fire is over and just, you know, seeing this fire move through the forest, being able to sit there and watch this forest regenerate back, and just the amazing life that results from a fire. You know, you've got this very catastrophic event, and yet, you know, months later, you've got beautiful wildflowers and amazing wildlife all throughout. So, you know, it was those kinds of early days as a young biologist that definitely left an impression.
And to this day, Tall Timbers is one of the preeminent organizations educating people on the necessity of, when it comes to conservation, of a fire program that can be managed and controlled. Thanks for that. Appreciate it, Shane. Chuck Hess, was your epiphany when you were chasing Terry Baker up that tree, or what was the kind of pivot point for you when it came to getting an appreciation of the great natural world out there?
Growing up in Florida, I grew up on one of the premier rivers of Florida, the Rainbow River, which is a crystal clear river down in Central Florida. And so I always had an appreciation for nature and what is out in the environment. You know, I was collecting snakes and everything as a child. You know, I was just fascinated with nature. But my aha moment came when I started working for the Forest Service. And the first time I walked into a summer fire, basically, you know, back in the 80s when this happened, summer fire wasn't really considered part of the management philosophy. And walking into an area that had been burned in wildfire that previous summer was just an aha moment, because it was just amazing the difference in the landscape caused by seasonal fires. And it's just one of those special experiences. If you haven't walked through a fire 6 months after a summer fire, walk through an area 6 months after a summer fire, it's just one of those experiences you have to have.
Yeah, I've heard the term kicked around by some forestry folks. Transfiguration is the word that I hear an awful lot. That's remarkable. Let's end up with you, Robin Will. Again, your personal recollection of something that was a big get for you when it came to this.
Well, as a child of the 60s, my parents camped. That's how we spent our vacations and our leisure time. And my mom was a Girl Scout leader. So of course I was in her Girl Scout troop, and I guess wearing brown and green, and those are the colors I ended up wearing for my career. So it was fate back then. But I remember skin diving in a tidal pool in a small park up in Maine on that rocky coastline, and just experiencing an amazing aha moment at all of the variety of life and color and texture that existed in that small little rocky cavern. And I just knew I had to be Jacques Cousteau. I had to learn about marine biology, and got interested in bears and elephants and everything, just very excited. So I just turned that into a career that ended up being focused on the psychology piece, which is connecting people to nature.
Robin, as long as we're in your neck of the woods, here's a question just for you. I know you love getting people turned on about being outdoors, communicating that same enthusiasm and love that you have there. What's your favorite example of making this connection actually in a forest?
Well, I'll talk about children that I used to work with when I did field trips at the refuge. And we used to do short nature walks behind the visitor center. And I remember we were walking with a small group, maybe second graders, and a little girl grabbed my hand and she said, "I have never been out of sight of buildings or roads, and this is really scary. And for her just to be, and the visitor center trail is not that big and it's not that far from a road, but that whole experience for her was really worrisome. And we talked about things she could see and how safe she was. And she looked at the other students and realized they were comfortable, and she sort of started to relax. So I feel like, okay, one little convert there. And then I had another experience where we were walking in a spring rain shower, and it was very light. It wasn't a heavy shower. There was no lightning. And a little boy came up and said, "This is scary. I've never walked in the rain." So things that I took for granted growing up, when we were able to run around out in the woods, is something today's children really need to have.
And we're happy that folks like you can continue to provide that kind of experience, Robin. Another general question here, and we'll go back around the room or around the screen, if you will. Starting with you, Terry Baker, how did you get involved in a natural resources career?
Sure, that's actually, it's a bit of a long story, but I'll shorten it for the time we have. It was by random chance, to be totally honest. It was one of those things where all those things I shared earlier, I had no idea that natural resources was a career option growing up and having those experiences I had. And so it ended up being a program that the U.S. Forest Service had at the time related to trying to bring more diversity into natural resources and into the Forest Service. And so I had a liaison reach out to me, and that's the fun part of the story. He called my help. Actually, there was an information card I filled out for Florida A&M University. So from that card, he called my home, talked to my mother, somehow convinced her that she should give him the phone number to the convenience store that I worked at in high school. So he called me there and then told me, "Hey, there's a scholarship and internship opportunity I have for you, but I need an answer by tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. And so it was quite the leap of faith in a few different ways, but it was one of those things that once I had a chance to start and go and intern on the Apalachicola National Forest, the rest is history. So it's just an amazing
That is terrific.
bit of chance, but really excited about where it's taken me in life and what I've been able to do.
How remarkable. What a great story. Shane Wellendorf, what's your personal pivot here and how you got into it?
Yeah, I grew up in Western Iowa in a rural community, and we chased a lot of ringneck pheasants there, and in the 80s they started to put grasslands back through the Natural Resource Conservation Service CRP program, and with that change in land use, the pheasants exploded and the wildlife exploded. And I was a teenager at the time and got to experience this. And there's the idea that, with a little bit of management, a little bit of thought, you can really impact wildlife populations. And from that, I decided that, I wanted to learn more, not only how to manage, but just the ecology of these species. And I came into it, really interested in game species and game management and hunting. But what you find is that you're dealing with a much larger ecology, and it's just a fascinating world out there. And how we're involved is really pretty amazing. So that was kind of my impetus into the field.
Thanks, Shane. For you, Chuck Hess, well, when did it become career central for you?
Oh, it was always career central for me. When I, growing up in Florida, in the 60s, it was you're really connected to nature, and I always just wanted to be working in nature. And that's where I was headed from the very earliest moments. I learned to dive in the 70s. You couldn't keep me out of the wildlands and or the wild waters with either one. So that was always my goal.
It's great to have a life fulfilled. That's terrific. Robin, Will, your story, please.
I was sort of like Terry, but it was just a pinned up notice at Florida State University in the Conradi Biology building that said wanted student interns at a Panama City fisheries office with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I thought, there's just no way I'm going to get that. There's so many other better students here than I am, but I thought, well, what the heck, let's go ahead and send in the application. And I have to say, Jimmy Carter was president and they were really looking for women. So I'm not going to say I wasn't qualified, but I think that didn't hurt my chances. And then once I got involved in wildlife biology and fisheries, I really, really found I had a passion for the people part, and I couldn't ignore it. So that's how I ended up being a ranger.
Well, education is such a primary concern of all of you guys, just from what we've heard so far. And Terry, if I can ask you, how did you personally connect to the U of F forestry program? And what do you think we could do locally, perhaps, to encourage more of a diversity of young folks to enter the natural resources field? Especially since, as Robin just told us, there are so many kids, from urban environments who don't have that kind of experience to pull from. How do we get to them, do you think?
That's a great question, Tom. I think that, the program that's there at University of Florida is, in particular, the forestry program and the natural resources program, those are programs accredited by the Society of American Foresters. And so for instance, one of the ways that we go about doing that is we actually create a college guide that showcases all the accredited forestry programs across the nation, that we share with guidance counselors and STEM teachers and academic advisors. So I think that's one way, but I think it's various opportunities, and I heard through the intros, Robin has done work with Project Learning Tree, and I think that's a huge opportunity to engage various audiences. We partner with Project Learning Tree actually quite a lot as the Society of American Foresters, as far as sharing curriculum and helping disseminate curriculum that they've helped develop. And some they've developed jointly with us about just teaching forests and communities about, teaching youth and communities about forests. So I think there's a lot of those interesting opportunities, but it's the willingness to show up and have a conversation, because just like Robin mentioned, it's just something that people aren't aware is an option. And even in some rural communities, people aren't aware that it's an option. And so I think there's just the responsibility that we have, that if we wanted to be more diverse and include folks from different backgrounds and different places, we've got to make that effort as professionals within that, and be willing to have those conversations and share what we're so passionate about that we know other people are passionate.
Terry, that is a great way to lead into a question I have here for Chuck, because born and raised Wakulla County folks probably have more of a connection to the natural world than many people in this country. But you got an awful lot of people who have moved into Wakulla in more recent years, grown-ups and kids. And so the question for you is, how can all residents of Wakulla County, the newcomers as well as some of the old timers maybe who have lost touch with some of this stuff, be more conversant on what the area has to offer as far as natural beauty and resources?
Well, being more conversant, this is one of the education problems like Robin deals with, is that you have to go out. Walking through the forest, if you don't understand the ecology of a forest, is like walking through an art museum with all the pictures turned around. There's so many things out there that are just spectacular stories if you have somebody to take you and show you these stories. You can talk about, I did woodpeckers. I can sit there and talk for 2 hours in the forest about woodpeckers, okay? And keep you entertained the whole time. And we need to have more and more opportunities for young people and older people to go out in the woods and experience these things. And we're losing, potential converts to conservation when we don't do that.
That gives us a lead into something I have for you, Shane Wellendorf, and we won't go into the political aspect, but the entire history of Florida is one in trying to reach a balance between natural resources and development, even up here in North Florida, South Georgia, where we have seen a relentless push to grow in various areas. So in your role there at Tall Timbers, since you guys are on the cutting edge of trying to show people how much value forests have. How do you go about protecting it in Florida and maybe working around the political ramifications of that relentless push for development? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think that most people in the state of Florida and throughout the South really, recognize that there are places for development and there are places for forests and agriculture and places for natural lands. And, it takes support for these natural lands coming from lots of different ways. We're really blessed in the state of Florida in that we've got an active land buying program and we've got dollars through Florida Forever to purchase conservation lands throughout the state. And, we've really been successful in the state of Florida. Almost 30% of the state of Florida is in public ownership, either through the state or federal, federal holdings. But there's also 70% of this of the state that is in private ownership, and there are a lot of owners that are willing to conserve their properties through tools like conservation easements, and willing to protect their lands from future development and protect those forests that they've been managing for so long. So there are opportunities for private landowners to participate in the greater conservation goals that we're trying to achieve for the state.
Perhaps for the more enlightened ones, but Robin, Will, how do you, just to the average person who says when they see a big stretch of wildlife, like what we're seeing behind you and Chuck right now on your screen backgrounds, they look upon that, and some, especially people who are part of this audience tonight, will say, oh my God, that is so lovely. That is magnificent. What a great wilderness area. And it has value and it has beauty. Other folks look at that and go, boy, what a waste of space. We got to do something with that property as far as making it pay for itself. How do you kind of sit in on that conversation and try to move it along in a more positive direction?
Well, everybody wants to talk about health. So if you can't get them by the aha moment of the red cockaded woodpecker or the frosted flatwood salamander or the eastern indigo snake or seeing a Florida black bear, we're going to go after your family and your health, because walking through forest and being in wild areas, now we know it benefits you. It reduces your cortisol, your stress level, your heart level. There's all kinds of chemicals released from these plants called phytoncides that help build our immune system and fight cancer. There is no reason why everyone living in the state and visiting the state shouldn't have access to clean, wild places to rebuild their health. So that's what I'm going to go for. I'm going to go for the health.
Okay, all right. Enlightened self-interest. That usually works pretty good.
Yeah.
Another general question to kind of go around the block, if we could here. And this we'll start with you, Terry Baker, if we could. How can the folks who are on this call, watching and listening right now, help conserve these wild species? It sounds like, again, in the face of development and climate change and all these other things that we think about, an insurmountable challenge. But what is some just day-to-day good things that the average person can do to help in this conservational effort?
Ooh, it's a great question. I think that there are various opportunities for folks to engage in supporting the conservation of these lands. I think Robin makes a great point about that personal interest. And sometimes everyone talks about health. There's understanding, especially for private forest landowners and the value that they have. There's a lot of folks who their lands are part of their retirement strategy, or how they send their kids to college through managing for forest health and harvest on a spaced out frequency. There's the ability to look at forests for that intrinsic value. There are the conservation easements that Shana brought up. I also think about some of the broader scale things that are facing the country and the world. We have the International Trillion Tree Initiative and what that means related to reforestation and planting trees in new places and how we responsibly manage forests. And I think obviously if folks are aware, in California, there's a carbon market, and it's that whole piece of forests being part of the climate solution that's facing the entire world, and so the ability to look at how forests are a benefit in that sense, and then there's actually the ability to tie value to that, monetary value, financial value. that starts to play into how businesses operate when you have the Amazons of the world and the Microsofts of the world saying they're going to be net zero or net, carbon negative in a 20-year time frame. So there are all these different values that are starting to come into play in the recognition of how important forests and natural spaces are, be it related to clean air, clean water, health, but also the economic impacts that they can have. And I believe there was a study done quite a few years ago, but it was roughly that forestry and natural resources contribute somewhere in the realm of about $14 billion to the Florida state economy. So there's a lot that comes into play when you look at a natural space. And as we've talked about from that educational place, people just don't know all the value that's wrapped up into those pictures behind Chuck and behind Robin. And that's the challenge that we all have, and that's part of the fun that we get to take on.
Yes, trees are green, but they also produce a lot of other kinds of green too, apparently. That's a good message to get out there. Shane Wellendorf, rubber meets the road, some helpful hints for the average person on how to take a more conservational attitude in their life.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks out there can support conservation by supporting organizations just like Appalachia Audubon. And just like the many land trusts throughout the state of Florida, there's about a dozen active land trusts that work in different parts of the state. Some of them have a statewide mandate like Conservation Florida. But these land trusts are working every day with private landowners to work on conservation easements, but they also do lots of land acquisitions. Sometimes there are acquisitions that they hold. Sometimes they serve as an intermediary on a transaction and ultimately get those properties to state or federal ownership. And so just by being a supporter of land trusts and not NGOs, non-governmental organizations that are doing conservation work is a great way to support that. And, for example, Appalachia Audubon and Audubon, Florida in particular, they have a strong lobbying presence too. And, they bring a voice for conservationists to the Capitol. And they make sure that the legislators hear that for many Floridians, land conservation is important and something that needs to be funded in the state. So, support your, support your nonprofits out there because they're doing lots of great work to help with conservation.
Yeah, and given the current strangeness in which we find ourselves right now, a lot of those nonprofits are struggling as never before. So it behooves everyone, if they have the capability, to support those organizations and those causes for which they feel an affinity. Now is probably the best of all possible times to do that. Chuck Hess, your thoughts again on getting more people involved in active conservation, some helpful hints for them. Oh, let's see, you have to take off mute there, Chuck. There you go.
It's really about paying attention. There's things that are important to everyone, and we need to be focused on telling our leaders and the people in our community what we feel, because the ecological services of the landscape behind me that's what cleans your water. That's what, if you want clean water, if you want clear springs, you've got to have landscapes like this to do that work for us, because we can't afford to do it economically. And understanding that and working to make sure that the land managers and the agencies and the government basically does the activities necessary to protect landscapes like this.
Okay, well, we'll wrap up this part of the discussion with you, Rob and Will. What do you think?
I'm going to go back to education and talk about getting Florida students back to environmental education and learning how they fit into the web of life in the state. We are so far behind other states as far as pushing out Project Learning Tree, Project Wild, getting kids to understand they can do math in the woods. They can do English while they're sitting next to a stream. They can do art while they're out by a beach. They can sketch birds. They can learn things that they're supposed to be learning for whatever testing is going on by using nature and nature's bounteous diversity. They can understand how they fit into that whole scene. And we mentioned, carbon dioxide being taken in by trees and oxygen being given off by trees and shade and air conditioning, all the things that Florida depends on. So I think we've just got to start at, cradle to grave, which is what environmental education is all about, getting people to understand their actions are important and what they do affects everything around the state. And I really, really would like to see us get back into that.
Very good. Folks, if you are in tune with what's going on here and you're wondering who are these people and why are they saying these things, this is the Pines to Palms celebrating community forests in Wakulla County and beyond with a panel of experts. This is under the auspices of Appalachia Audubon in partnership with the Old Growth Forest Network. And if you're just joining us, you may not be aware of the fact that two of the newest old growth areas in the whole country are in our very own Wakulla County, and we're so recognized tonight. The official presentation will take part tomorrow. Audience question and answer. There is a place where you can click on that and to pose your question. Let's see if we have so many good things to talk about here this evening. As soon as I can find a good question that we have. This is a good one. How does one go about pursuing a job in the fields these panelists work in? Let's get some insight from each of our participants on this one. Terry Baker, I want to do what you do. How do I go about doing that?
Well, it's probably you want to do what you think I do, or maybe what I did once before, not quite what I do right now. Being an executive for a nonprofit is not. I don't spend as much time in the woods as I'd like, I guess is the best way to put it. But to be a forester, obviously, it's actually a very technical degree. Like Robin was just mentioning, there's a lot of math and a lot of science, probably more complex than folks realize, and so. Usually that includes going to school for at least 2 years, and in some cases 4 years for a degree, and then going out and working for various organizations. For a long time, you had the large timber companies, you had the U.S. Forest Service and state forestry organizations like the Florida Forest Service, but there's also opportunities to work for nonprofits. I wouldn't be surprised if Tall Timbers has a forester on staff because of the way they're looking at managing the ecology of that area. Same thing with other nonprofits. I know the Turkey Federation has foresters on staff. So it's definitely broadened into the roles that foresters play. And of course, there are consulting firms that help private landowners with their land as well. And then so there's a lot of great opportunities, and it's just, where do you land in that, and folks that work in extension for universities that really engage in the teaching aspect of it. So just really wherever you want to go, but it starts with getting that foundational education and understanding forest ecology and forest management. And then it's off to the races from there.
Shane Willendorf, is Tall Timbers hiring?
We're always looking for great folks that are excited about being outside and working with natural resources. And what I always recommend to folks is volunteer, volunteer, volunteer. That is really a way that you can get lots of great experience and learn so much. You look at the types of activities that many of these local organizations are doing, whether it's Appalachia Audubon or the Native Plant Society. They're always going on hikes, and there's always things going on all around this community. And it's a great opportunity to experience the natural world and hang out with some really smart people that understands the forest and the places that you're going. And as somebody that does employ a lot of young people and a lot of new biologists, when I see a resume that's full of somebody that's been willing to spend their time volunteering and visiting, places and being active with other organizations, just tells me that, their heart's in it and they're ready to come to work and be a great natural resource professional.
Good response. Thank you, Shane. And Chuck, before I ask you how to get involved in that, there was a personal aside that came in here. I'm not sure from whom, but it says, How many cans of peanuts and Vienna sausages did you scarf down during your career as a biologist?
Thousands, I would bet. Mostly boiled peanuts, but as a that was one of my favorite meals out in the forest. One of the things that, you know, if you wanted to get a job in natural resources, you need an education, but you also need to, like Shane said, volunteer. I used to take every year, because I was doing research and working for the Forest Service, I'd have volunteers help me with banding woodpeckers. Terry Baker went up with me banding woodpeckers. And I used to run 30 a year through that program, and almost all of them went on to get some kind of work in natural history, because it was a really good training opportunity. And they understood the forest once they left it, because, you know, people walk in the woods, but they don't understand the woods until they've had somebody explain it to them. And it was a real benefit to them and to me doing my research.
Very good. Robin, Will, I could ask you the same thing when it comes to the St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge there. I know there's an awful lot of opportunities for volunteerism in all of these aspects here, but how do you suggest someone kind of follow your path, if you will?
Yeah, I really like what Shane said and what Chuck said. We're very fortunate. We have a friends group that provides scholarships for interns to come and work on the refuge with our wildlife biologist, Joe Ryman. And these are amazing young people, and they do go on to get competitive jobs in wildlife conservation. And I'm so proud of that program. It's amazing. It's got a lot of support. And I think we've hired over 40 interns through the time of that program. But if other agencies could look to build internships and scholarships for young people to come and work, because, you know, sometimes you think you want to do something, and when you actually come out and go through the work study program, you find out maybe there's a different angle, sort of like me, even though I was planting trees and I was running around with the biologist Red Gidden trying to look and learn birds and stuff. I found out the people aspect and the passion of working with people was really my little forte, and I left all that other wonderful stuff to our biologists.
Well, before we move on, Robin, here's something that just came in for you. What environmental education opportunities are there, if any, that are like the E.O. Wilson Biophilia Center? And how could we create something like that here?
I know there are counties in Florida that have agreements with public lands or nonprofit groups to do environmental education, and I would love to see an initiative to connect Leon and Wakulla counties to all of our beautiful resources that we have and do education programs. And I see Shane nodding his head. I think all of us would love that to be a part of the curriculum. So any way that folks could research how to go about that and just do it grassroots, don't wait for the state legislature to tell us to do it. We're just going to do it because it's important to our children.
Well, folks, since tonight is a celebration of the wonders of Wakulla County and the two designations of old growth forests in Wakulla County now, let's get your insights on what makes this particular growth of forest unique and special and wonderful, in your opinion, starting with you, Terry Baker. Because people look at this, they say woods is woods. This is very, very unique. Why?
Yeah, I think the opportunity of how unique forests are and what they mean to each and every one of us is one of those things, like, you know, it's that personal connection. And I think, like Chuck mentioned, the ability to go out with someone who knows a little bit more is always helpful. But the ability to go out and just you know, that bit of peace. I mean, I think that's one of the most amazing parts associated with being in a forest, is if you can find a spot that's far enough away from civilization at times, the peace that you feel when you're there, the connection you feel to nature, and the grounding that it gives you. There's nothing quite like that. And the more that people have an opportunity to get out and experience that, I think the better. And it speaks to everything we've talked about tonight. It's that chance to to not only create the next generation of natural resource professionals, but create the next generation of knowledgeable lawmakers and policy producers and regulators and voters. You know, that's as much a key piece as those folks actually out there practicing natural resource management, are the folks that are going to be providing a policy that we're working within. And so I think that, you know, that's just the key piece for all of us, is that chance to just connect and give yourself that chance to connect and just let go and enjoy the forest, because there's nothing quite like that experience.
Shane Willendorf, what are your feelings and thoughts along that line?
Yeah, you know, we're really blessed with the opportunity to have some really old forests. You know, you think about a longleaf pine, it can live 300 to 500 years, maybe older. Think about bald cypress, they can live even longer. These are trees that are a much different lifespan than us humans are. And there's very few places left where you have really old trees. And so efforts that have been made either on public lands or private lands to find these special old these places with these old trees, protect them is absolutely critical, because we need to learn from these forests. We need to understand how these old forests function, which is very different than many of the younger forests that we deal with. You know, and while we're protecting these few little small areas of old growth forest that we still have, what I'm really excited about is the knowledge that we've got great public lands, we've got great public lands managers, and just think about the future generations ahead and the cool forests they're going to see. And think about what St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge or Apalachicola National Forest is going to look like in 200 years with really good management over that time. Those generations are going to experience lots of old growth forest. And for me, that is really exciting and something that's inspiring to, you know, to do the work that we do.
Okay, Chuck has your favorite aspect of the Wakulla County forest that you have inhabited all your life. I see your mic's off there, Chuck. Sorry.
I've walked basically 250,000 acres of the Apalachicola National Forest. I've seen a lot of it, okay? And we have some of the most amazing views out there as long as you get off the roads and get out there. The landscape behind me has been burned every year, every other year for the last 50 years. And this is what the forest should be looking like. A lot of times it isn't. And these are the experiences that if you get out into the woods and going cross country in the woods, you'll start seeing these. One of the, you know, in Wakulla County, you can take the Bradwell Bay Wilderness area, and there's a Florida Trail goes right through the middle of it. Now, it's a full day hike, so don't, but it is a good experience to go all the way across Bradwell Bay. And, you know, those are the kind of things that people need to try and get out into nature and enjoy it.
Thank you, Chuck. And Robin, will you have the last word on this one?
I'm going to quote John Muir because I love his stuff. Nature's peace will flow into you as the sunshine flows into trees. The winds blow their own freshness upon you and the storms their energy, while cares will drop off like autumn leaves. As age comes on, one source of enjoyment after another is closed, but nature's sources never fail.
You have to admit that ending a presentation with a quote from John Muir is probably one of the best ways to go out, for sure. Thank you, Robin. And to all of our panelists, as time draws short on our hour-long get-together tonight to talk about the wonders of the wildlife in Wakulla County, which also includes us. As an old forest ranger of my acquaintance once said, remember, without the forests, we would not exist, because we are also children of the forest. And that's something I think that we all need to remember. Folks, again, congratulations to Wakulla County for being the location of the two newest old growth forest areas in the entire United States. To our friends with Appalachia Audubon in partnership with the Old Growth Forest Network. This has been a terrific evening. And to our panelists, Shane Wellendorf, Chuck Hess, Rob and Will, and of course, Terry Baker, still climbing those trees and looking for those cockaded woodpeckers that we all know and love so much. Thank you all for being a part of this extravaganza this evening. I think we've all learned something about the woods. Peter, throw it back to you, sir.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for those amazing answers and for being here, all of you panelists and park managers and Joan. I feel very inspired. I think that's the key word here from what you guys said. So I just want to thank everybody for participating, all of our audience members, and encourage you all to check out the Old Growth Forest Network, check out our 2 parks, check out the organizations our panelists are from, and most importantly, check out the experiences to get out there. I think every panelist stressed that, get out in the woods and experience these places. We have posted information on our website, and we'll be posting information on Facebook about some of the best natural areas in Wakulla County to check out. And if any of you have suggestions, please feel free to send us those and connect with us on Facebook. And we hope to see you out on the trail. So thank you all so much.